think we're out gathering
He can
votes.
knock that on my head, and that will work.
I want to ask a procedural issue to the select board. Do you need to do anything formal in terms of calling your meeting to order?
Yes, yep.
All right, when do you want, since you're, well, I'm going to call our meeting to order right now, okay? And I'm going to grant permission to Westwood Media Center to film and record the meeting. This is not being televised because the planning board has a meeting tonight that is being televised, and to accommodate the select board because of Monday's holiday, we moved our meeting to tonight. So I welcome any citizens who are here. It will be recorded, so you'll get a chance to watch it afterwards. I do want to welcome the select board. I see Mr. Gotti. Madam Chairperson is here, and Mr. Privatera, welcome to you. I see our superintendent, Mr. Pivovar. Did I get it close?
Close, yeah, Pavovar.
Pivovar. I apologize for not pronouncing it correctly. I also see the chairman of the school committee, Mr. Mullen. Tony, welcome. And I see Ticia's here and a few other folks, welcome. So with that, what I'm going to do is ask that we stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance, and then the select board you can call your meeting to order. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Chair, do you want to call your meeting to order?
Yes,
Or?
thank you, Mr. Chair. I will entertain a motion to open the meeting of the select board.
I move we open this October 10th meeting of the select board in attendance here at the Finance and Warrant Commission.
Roll call, Mr. Privatera? Oh,
Here.
second, and here, Mr. Gotti?
Here.
I vote aye as well.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for opening the meeting. The only comments I have before we turn it over to the chair of the select board is I just want to welcome our new member, Seth Frederickson, and it was a wonderful background, and thank the moderator for providing the FinCom with quite a skilled group of people who serve as volunteers. So Seth, welcome.
Thank you.
You're a member of the crew. So you need to do your roll call now, right?
Do you want him to do any introductions?
Seth, do you want to say anything, or, I'm not sure you know everybody on the board, but.
We're not going to put you on the spot or anything.
Yeah,
But we just did.
We appreciate it. No, just really quick introduction. Seth Frederickson. I've been in Westwood for nearly 10 years. I have a long experience in dealing with CapEx projects and submitting, directing, getting justification for $500 million worth of CapEx projects. So excited to bring that experience here and be part of the FinCom team. So.
Okay, and I think what we'll do is you'll get to meet all the FinCom members individually. Hopefully, people will go up and introduce themselves and talk to you afterwards. We'll welcome aboard. I think we've also put you on the Education Committee, so that should be a very good way for you to get your feet wet.
Yes.
Okay, so welcome to FinCom. With that, will you do our roll call so we can officially start the meeting?
Okay. Bill Bruce,
Here.
John Kerry,
Here.
Jim Ferrero, Lauren Fitzpatrick,
Here.
Seth
Here.
Frederickson, sorry, Mike Gay,
Here.
George Hertz,
Here.
Angela Hughes, here, Caitlin Jerzak's not here, George Laham,
Here?
George Marone,
Here.
Christina Batachewicz, here, Chris Peretta,
Here?
Sean Muller's not here, and Alex Yale.
Here.
Okay, welcome, everybody. So with that, I will turn it over to the chairman of the select board. Chairperson of the select board, I should say. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Hertz. Thanks to all of you. It is really a pleasure and a bit strange to be in this spot, seeing as I served on that side of the table for 9 years. And this is my first time sitting here at a FinCom meeting, but I'm really glad to be here. I served on FinCom for 9 years, and I chaired it for 5. So I very much understand what your job is and how important it is to the entire town. And I hope all those in attendance and all those watching and listening know how important your role is and this institution of the Finance and Warrant Commission. Seth, I want to welcome you to the FinCom. There's a lot of history here, and you have great folks to serve with under the leadership of Mr. Hertz, with whom I had the pleasure to serve along with Mr. Ferraro, who I'm sure will be here momentarily. So with that said, I do want to tell you that from the select board perspective, I think I understand maybe better than most how, again, how important FinCom's role is, and also how important the process is, and keeping in mind, God bless you, the timing of warrant articles and the work that you have to do, because, again, I did that work here for 9 years, and I know how hectic it gets at the end of town meeting season for you. So that's something that I am very cognizant of and will be keeping in mind as we head through the year. Of course, this is early in the year, so there is no warrant before you, but still FinCom has its work in terms of getting to really understand how the town works, especially for newer members, and I know that's what you'll be doing in the early part of the season. And this is our first meeting to come to you to give you an update as to where we are. The budget process will not start until later in the year. So what we really have for you tonight is to let you know where we are right now. And welcome, Mr. Ferraro.
Sorry I'm late. Didn't mean to interrupt.
Not at all. And I would ask our finance director and assistant town administrator, Stephanie McManus, to join me to provide you with that update. So thank you again for having us tonight.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Marianne. So
I need to get
I have a hopefully pretty brief presentation. And as Marianne said, the budget process is sort of starting, so a lot of this will be focused on that, but then I'm also going to sort of give an overview of town finances in general, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. All right, and I figured a good place to start off as sort of a reminder to those who already know this, and then anyone who's new and they maybe not aware of the town's financial policies, because those sort of affect probably everything you do in your work as FinCom. So the Select Board adopted a set of financial policies originally in 2004. These policies are reviewed every 3 years or so to see if there's any updates needed. Most recently, those policies were updated right before I got here in 2022. They provide guidelines for the continued financial stability of the town, and just listed here are a few highlights that I'll go through quickly. So each year we develop the overall budget to be structurally balanced with ongoing expenses supported by ongoing revenue. We produce annual financial reports. We also have a third party perform an independent audit each year of all finances, which produces the annual comprehensive financial report, the ACFR, used to be known as the CAFR. The audit committee also provides review and oversight during this process, so this ensures public accountability in all of our financial management. During the budget process, we have specific procedures that help us maintain our financial well-being. This includes an annual appropriation to an operating reserve fund for unforeseen or extraordinary expenses throughout the year, maintaining adequate working capital in the general fund by keeping the unallocated free cash target at 4% of the operating budget, and then strategically funding and utilizing different reserve accounts. There are also a few policies on debt management that are especially important because of the number of competing priorities going on right now in the town with limited resources. I'll go into those in more detail later on, but the two important ones to highlight is that for non-exempt debt, that policy is to not exceed 8% of the net general fund revenue. And then for total general debt, both exempt and non-exempt, it's not to exceed between 10 and 12% of that net general fund revenue. And as a very broad number, just to give you basis on that, for FY23, I'd say that's about 100 million right now. It's the operating budget net of certain debt and other finances. So a round number to give you is about 100 million. So say, and I'll get into this later, but for non-exempt debt, that would be 8 million, say, as the not to exceed number. All right, so, and just some general information about municipal finance and how it relates to Westwood. This is probably an easy one, but the fiscal year runs from July 1st to June 30th. The town is required, as I said, to report all revenue expenditures annually. We're also required to send monthly budget to actual reports to department heads for tracking purposes. So all of our finances are overseen and regulated by the Department of Revenue, or the DOR. They approve our tax rate, which we'll be getting into in the next month or two. They regulate all of our revenue and expense treatments, the meals and hotel tax, town meeting vote requirements, all of that. They authorize any use of debt, approve all town values, and they also, biggest one, which happened recently, is they certify our free cash. We have an annual audit every year. They were just on site in September for 2 weeks, so the on-site audit was completed, and they said that they love working with Westwood, which was such a great thing to hear. Our finance team is really great. Our town accountant, treasurer, collector's office, everyone really does a great job pitching in for that, to the on-site audit and providing all documents that are needed. So that produces what I call the ACFR report. That's due out December 31st. So our audit committee is a 3-member committee, and they're comprised of appointed residents. They're fantastic too. So they report to the select board on any audit results that will be coming out with that report. And as I'm sure you know, our credit rating, which is great for the town, our current rating from Standard & Poor's is AAA. So, and that is updated every time we issue debt, which is the highest credit rating you can have, which is very important when we issue debt because it allows us to get the lowest interest rates possible. So the budget cycle. This is a very interesting and kind of chaotic time of year for finance in the fall because 3 fiscal years is sort of all happening at once. We recently completed our FY23 year-end closeout, and we presented to the select board recently on some of these items. A big one was free cash certification, which was just completed with the DOR. There's also state reporting requirements going on with the DOR, and the school department is heavily involved in that with the Department of Education and preparing a lot of financial reports that come out of the school department for that. FY23 audit, as I said, the on-site audit was completed in September, and that report will come out by the end of December. And that includes, I know this comes up a lot, but it'll include an update on OPEB, all of our finances, all of that. So stay tuned. Then the audit committee will meet with the auditors and report to the select board. FY24, funny enough, we're still sort of completing the budget process for FY24, which might seem odd because it started in July, but we still have to finalize the FY24 property values. That'll be happening October, November. Finalize and get approval from the DOR for all of our values for FY24, including the final FY24 new tax growth, which is very important because throughout the entire FY24 budget cycle, that was an estimated number, and we are just now getting into the process of getting that certified and getting the new growth number, which will happen hopefully late November, early December. And then the tax rate, which is a big one. The FY24 tax rate, the final rate will be set in November. We are planning to present to the select board on November 13th, what's called the tax classification hearing, and that sets the shift factor for residential and the commercial split, because we have a split tax rate here in Westwood. So we'll submit the FY24 tax rate for approval by the DOR, and then actual tax bills, the first actuals, we call them, up until now, the first 2 quarterly tax bills that have gone to residents have been estimates, what we think. It was about an 8% increase we were estimating, and these will be the final numbers that will be mailed out January 1st. And then FY25, we'll be beginning the budget process for that. Capital and operating budgets will be drafted and reviewed throughout the next few months. This is just a brief timeline, more for just for you to have. This is based on the select board's current schedule, FinCom's schedule. Really the big ones to highlight are annual town meeting for FY25 will be May 6th. By charter, the select board is required to present the FY25 budget recommendation by February 1st. That's a big date to have in mind. And then assuming the public hearings, FinCom will be happening March 26th, 27th. So those are the big ones. And then budget-wise, the next thing to happen will be the 5-year capital book will be issued hopefully late November, by the latest early December, and then we'll be presenting that to the select board for them to review and draft the articles for town meeting. The available documents that finance produces and is involved in are the highlights I have here. The major ones are the capital book. Like I said, that'll be sometime this fall, hopefully late November, we'll produce that. The municipal budget detail, which will be important when the municipal subcommittee is meeting. That's the document you'll sort of be using to review and go through all the municipal department budgets. The school department budget detail, which will be coming out, both those documents are usually in January. The overall budget summary, which is due out February 1st by the charter. The town meeting warrant book, which you know about, that'll include the big part of ours is the operating budget, the Appendix D that we call, and then it also includes a lot of substantial, which I have in front of me as you can see, background financial information, anything you can want to know about finances. And then that financial report that the auditors put together will be December 31st. And all of these are posted on the town website if you ever need to look at them. So the FY23 year-end review is all positive. We presented this recently to the select board. Revenue closed out smoothly. We're lucky in town. Real estate tax and motor vehicle revenue collections were on target, and the collections remain strong. Meals and hotel tax revenue had been down. It's now rebounded in FY23, which is positive. Expenditures closed out successfully. Any department overages were covered by select board transfer or town meeting Articles 1 and 2. This is in compliance with our financial policies. We do this regularly each year. If anything is over, we can supplement through Articles 1 and 2, which is for the current fiscal year. Apologize. So overall, FY23 closed out successfully with revenue expenditure results on track with prior years. So this is a big one, a big highlight that we just got an update recently. Each year, free cash is certified through the Department of Revenue. I'm going to read a really technical, quick definition I came up with. So free cash is remaining unrestricted funds from operations of the previous fiscal year, including actual receipts in excess of revenue projections and any unspent amount in budget line items. And if you ever want to get very technical, I included the DOR's definition of free cash. If you ever want to read through that, I won't do that now. The calculation of free cash is based on the balance sheet as of June 30th, which is submitted by the town accountant. She did a fantastic job with it this year. It's a lot of detail that goes into it. We have to report on everything we spend, all revenue sources, all of those finances. And they did it smoothly this year and early enough that we got it certified very early. And that number came out at $10,959,301. So, and I know we've heard this before, we use a disciplined use of free cash in the town. It's not used for ongoing operating expenditures or budget shortfalls. We keep the fund balance. We don't deplete the entire fund balance. We like to keep it available for capital needs, not operating budgets. So since it was a positive FY23 budget to actual results, it was appropriate amount for year-ending operating budget turned back. There were no issues there. And just as a reminder, this lists what we used for the FY24 current budget that we're in, that was just approved at the last town meeting, which was about $3.8 million of free cash. So the amount of free cash, I'm going to say 10.9, so I don't have to say that whole number again, is higher than the previous year's balance of 7.7 million. Like I said, unallocated free cash target for our financial policies is about 4%, which comes out to about $4 million. So additional free cash beyond the target is used for base school municipal capital, extra capital snow and ice to supplement our snow and ice budget, one-time needs, our FinCom reserve budget, to cover any extraordinary or unforeseen expenses that arise during the fiscal year. So we, in FY24, that was the first budget year that we started funding the FinCom reserve, which is $405,000 with free cash. So this unallocated balance provides protection for the town. It can't be used for ongoing expenses. So it is, I want to point out that this year's increase is higher than previous year's balance, and is due to a few unique factors. So a major driver for this increase is revenue, FY23 revenue from local receipts, in particular what we call investment income. And this is due to the impact of both a higher than normal cash balance due to the borrowing for the elementary school. So that borrowing amount, it was about 60 million, sits in an account, obviously, and it can accrue interest. And the impact of also higher interest rates, higher than normal interest rates available. So the combination of these factors created a unique situation. We don't expect this to be the normal ongoing amount. And then also I will point out that strategically, each year we utilize different revenue sources for the additional capital projects. We used meals and hotel tax this past town meeting, which sort of allowed our balance of free cash to build up a little bit. So we fluctuate back and forth depending on the year and what we have for balances in our different accounts. Excuse me, sorry. So FY23 revenue, like I said, it's consistent collections. Taxes are about 80% of our revenue. So it's a very important component of our financial stability. Our collection rate is 99% right now, which is fantastic. It's consistent year to year. And just as a reminder, Proposition 2.5, I always have to bring this up when we talk about taxes. So it limits the total property taxes the community can raise. It's 2.5% plus new growth. Just as a reminder, this does not apply to the individual tax bills. It's the overall amount the town is able to raise. So we can choose to override these limits with a town meeting vote. There are two options: general override, which additional funds for any purpose can be raised. This permanently increases the tax levy limit. This has not happened in the town of Westwood since, I believe, 2007. The other option is a debt exemption. So this is to pay for capital projects. It's annual debt service added to the tax levy. It's not permanent, it ends when the bond ends. So as an example, the school project that was borrowed for 30 years, so after that project is done, the levy will go back down. It's not a permanent increase in taxes. And this is the chart that we use for the calculation of how the tax levy is set per Prop 2.5. I won't go through this because I know we've done this a bunch of times, but the current levy limit, which I just have for 24 right here. We haven't gotten into 25 just yet because new growth has not been certified. But for now, it is the prior year's levy limit plus the 2.5% plus new growth. And we always estimate conservatively for that. Then we can add in any exempt debt we have, and this gets us to the what we could tax. And then if we have any unused tax levy, that gets us to what we actually do tax. So, general debt overview.
Bethany, do you need some water? Or
Yes,
something?
I'm
Do you-
sorry.
No, no,
I
take
brought
your
some
time.
and I forgot it.
Take your time.
George, want to say questions at the end?
Sorry about that.
No, I just want to make sure you're okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. So, town meeting, this is just a general review of how debt works. Town meeting authorizes borrowing of any funds of a specific project. The town then issues debt to finance approved capital projects. So, issuing debt allows the town to build assets that it cannot be funded through existing cash resources. And then the repayment schedule from the bonds issued is updated annually, and the annual debt service amount is then included in each year's operating budget. So, the current financial policies state that the annual non-exempt debt payment should not exceed 8% of, that's the number I came up with earlier, of net general fund revenue. Current debt is well within the guidelines.
You want to take just stop for a sec, catch your breath?
I brought the cough drop because I knew this might happen, but I'm just trying to push through.
Bethany, just
Oh my God, thank you, you're very kind.
take your time.
So 8%. For FY '24, that total debt payment amount is $3.3 million. So as you can see, we're well within our policy. And this is just debt authorized but not yet issued. I wanted to bring this up just as a reminder that the total long-term outstanding debt for FY '24 is $86.5 million, but we also have debt that has been authorized and not yet issued. Just pausing so you can take a minute to look.
No, why don't you just, let's just take a second here, catch your breath. I've had that happen to me, and I don't want you to just relax, okay? It's seasonal cough time for everybody, so.
I'm not even sick, this is just
Okay.
dry air. So this is And I think the most confusing part about this chart that I want to highlight is the school project borrowing. So the authorized amount, I believe, please don't quote me, I think it was 87 million at town meeting. This is everything that's still authorized to borrow but has not yet been issued long-term. It includes the bridge funding, the design, feasibility, construction, everything. That amount, what will actually be borrowed, will be reduced by the expected MSBA reimbursement. At the time, that was 16.4 million. That could fluctuate. It's an estimated number. Do you mind reading this?
Oh, sure.
Sorry, Mary. You can just read.
I will
there.
read from there.
Sorry.
So, the Select Board has supported continued reinvestment in the town's assets and infrastructure. The town annually produces a 5-year capital improvement plan document that you are all familiar with, which is the basis for the capital articles that the Select Board will recommend, which includes ongoing capital purchases, maintenance, replacement needs, et cetera. The capital book also includes our capital financial policies, asset inventory schedules, et cetera. All capital requests are categorized based on how the item will be voted and funded. So with respect to warrant article capital projects and equipment, and capital projects that will be funded by bonds. There is in place a long-range financial planning committee, which is comprised of members, well, the Select Board, representation from the Select Board, School Committee, Planning Board, Board of Assessors, Town Administrator, Tax Collector, Treasurer, Economic Development, Town Administration, School Administration, as well as community members. And that group is tasked with focusing on the broader financial picture of the town on a long-term basis, and that committee has been working in earnest over the last number of months and will be advising the Select Board. So really a great mechanism for looking at our long-term needs in a very deliberate manner. Next steps in the budget cycle.
Last slide.
Last slide.
And then I'll get away from you.
As Stephanie said, we will have our tax classification hearing on November 13th, where the Select Board will determine the commercial residential tax shift. Then November through February Select Board meetings, we will continue to update and review FY25 revenue projections. That includes local revenue sources, the FY25 state budget, tax levy calculation. We will be reviewing capital budget articles on the Select Board. That includes ongoing capital needs as well as timing of larger projects being considered. And then we'll have a review of FY25 municipal budget requests, including the base budget, as well as any requested new positions or programs. Of course, state aid also figures into that, and the governor's budget typically comes out at the end of January, sometimes sooner, sometimes later, which will be previewed at the MMA meeting in January. And then, as Stephanie said, the Select Board proposed budget document will be coming out February 1. Which will include the municipal budget document, the overall budget summary, and capital budget articles. And that will be presented to FinCom in February of 2024. How'd I do?
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It's always nice having your assistant with you.
Indeed.
Okay, so thank you, Madam Chair, for stepping in. The other thing I want to mention is Mr. Coleman did call me. He's out on a medical issue, and he apologized for not being here tonight, and I told him I would mention that, so normally he would be up here with us. Okay?
Yep.
So at that point, let me turn it over to FinCom members to see if there are any questions. Alex?
Yep. Thanks, Stephanie. Great presentation, as always. Question about free cash flow. I think you referenced one of the town's financial policies, obviously not to offset ongoing expenses with one-time cash, so not paying the tax bill with, free cash flow that frees up. But I think you mentioned that the target is 4% of the operating budget, right?
Yes,
And I think if
should
I
be
cut,
about 4 million.
we have 4 million, so we are, way over that
Mhm.
this year. You mentioned some of the nuances around why it's 10 million versus closer to 4 million. How have we performed historically, and you get a free pass on this because you're relatively new to the town, but what percentage have we been at the last few years in terms of percentage of free cash flow of the total budget?
So I want to make sure, so free cash flow is a very different thing, so, here, the free cash gets certified, so that $10.9 million number is sort of a snapshot in time. And now, as we work through the budget cycle, we'll be utilizing that for base school municipal capital, that's about 2.4 million right there. 405,000 for the FinCom reserve, 125,000 that goes towards our stabilization fund, and then any additional articles. So that quickly sort of drops down towards that $4 million number that I talked about, and that's a goal. The town has met that goal the last few years. Last year was certified at 7.7 million. I think we utilized about 3.8 of that. So we were still very much online, just at that target number. The year before that, we might have been a slight bit below that. But as far as the target number, we are reaching it, and we utilize that free cash very strategically. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Actually, I was less concerned about whether we were hitting that target and more that we were way over the target.
Oh,
in
okay.
terms of
Yep.
percentage. But is that correct? Like, am I correct in that we're at?
At a moment in time,
9%
we're
versus-
certified at 10.9, and our goal is to always keep at least 4 million. But like I said, we're gonna be using some of that free cash over the next couple of months as the budget cycle progresses.
Okay. Question, sort of part two of that is, I know that you had a slide, or you have a slide on unauthorized debt. Things like,
Yep.
the fire ladder truck, that's the 1.8 million. Does it make more sense for the town to use free cash to pay for some of those unissued debt, because interest rates are so high?
So those were authorized at the previous town meeting to be funded through borrowing when we did not have our free cash certified, so it's not something we could go back and sort of apply to that. It's something we can look at as we go through the budget cycles. Like I said, strategically, we can look at what makes sense to borrow long-term for, and what makes sense for projects to maybe utilize the free cash towards that would be more beneficial, just to use that source of funding.
So are we committed to debt at certain interest rates already for some of these not issued debt, or no?
Nope, so a few of the projects, there are design projects that were approved at town meeting of 2022. If you have them there, the cemetery design, Ann Street, and one more that I cannot remember right now. Those were issued as a ban short-term, so we've already borrowed for those. We're gonna be rolling that into long-term borrowing when we go out for what I would assume probably would next be the rest of the school borrowing later in this fiscal year. And then the fire truck and the cemetery construction, at that point, we'll also look at how much we should go out to borrow long-term. We'll roll it all together.
Right.
But we probably won't start looking at that until at least December or January to see where we are exactly.
Yeah.
And we'll see rates at that time.
Okay. Yeah, my thought is just, rather than borrow for high interest, can we use our own cash that we have to pay for some of those things? And I guess, thinking out further, how can we lessen the tax burden on the taxpayers by,
Absolutely.
either having less free cash at the end of the year, or using that free cash against, not things that are annual expenses, but something that might be a little more tangible?
No, it's a great point, and this is why I think the budget process is so important as we get into it, because we'll sort of chip away and see what we're using as part of that 10.9 towards our annual, what we do each year, what we have left over, and seeing where it is best utilized with all the competing priorities. Yep.
If I may ask one more question, unrelated to those two. I know on the municipal budget review and the FinCom subcommittee, some folks were on that. One question, or one data point that you provided that was really helpful was percentage of the budget that was used up through a certain point in the year. So I know that we're talking through, getting budget requests in like February timeframe or so. Are you able to provide a snapshot of what percentage of the budgets have been used for the first 6 months of the year?
Sure, for the
As part of
current FY '24?
Yeah,
Yep,
exactly.
we do monthly budget to actual reports. We produce those for the departments themselves, and then just internally to track. So at any point in time, we can we can supply that.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful for us to have that data alongside with the next year budget request, say, hey, you know, XYZ department's looking for $50,000 on this. FYI, through, you know, the first 6 months of this previous fiscal year, they used, you know, 27%, so they're tracking way under in terms
No,
of.
that's absolutely doable,
Great.
yes.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Two quick questions. Stephanie, do you currently, and if not, have you considered using interest rate swaps to mitigate where we are in the rate cycle?
So we heavily rely on our financial advisors when we determine those things, and that's sort of what we'll be talking about when I said we're gonna meet with the town treasurer, who's fantastic, and then the assistant town treasurer and myself probably in December or so, and sit down and talk about all of that, and where we are with debt and what we're thinking. So we do have financial
regardless of what
advisors
they
that
tell
weigh
you,
in.
I would suggest considering using interest rate swaps.
Okay.
Just to mitigate, and happy to take this offline if anybody.
Yeah, thank you, that's much appreciated.
And second question, just to help clarify my understanding of non-exempt debt, I think I was under the impression it was, the limitation was related to a outstanding par amount. But it-
Sorry, what? An
Outstanding par amount,
Okay.
but it says payments. So is the limit on the par amount outstanding, or is it on the interest payments?
It's the principal and interest payments each year. So each fiscal year, we have a number in our operating budget under debt service. Part of that number is for exempt debt, and then part is for non-exempt debt. So the payment we will be making in FY '24 for all of our non-exempt debt is 3.3 million. We never want that amount to be higher than the 8%, which at this point is 8 million. So it's the
okay,
payment,
so
it's the
help me
annual
wrap-
payment.
wrap
Does
my-
that make sense?
Well, it does, but I assume we're using bullet debt and not amortizing debt. In other words, the annual payments are just interest only? Is that right, or,
We have we have interest and principal payments each year.
so the
Unless
debt
it's a
itself
ban.
amortizes, or, I know that, and I don't wanna
So
get too.
debt naturally decreases. It does. Each year we have an amount that rolls off. We call it,
On maturity though, right?
each year, it's declining debt. So, and that all depends on how the bond is issued as well.
Okay.
Does that answer?
Not really, but it's okay, but it's just for my own understanding. It's
Yeah,
not-
sure.
So I can maybe,
And I'm happy to always
grab
talk
you
about this
offline or
with you.
something.
Yeah, sure.
Always gotta make sure I look to the left, which I have not properly done, so I'm checking here. Okay, you go.
Thank you, Stephanie. Great presentation. You answered several of the questions that I had coming in already, so that's good. But I just want to clarify the difference between what's on slide 13 and what's on slide 14. 13 shows, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think 13 shows the amount of interest payments, debt service payments,
Interest and principal payments.
interest in principal, right, okay.
Within Prop 2 is,
Does-
different ways of saying it. Debt managed within Prop 2.5 or non-exempt debt.
So,
Either way of saying it.
on 13, does that show that $3 million for fiscal year '24? Does that include or doesn't include any debt service on the amounts that we borrowed for the new Pine Hill School?
Does not. So the total debt service amount for FY '24 was, oh my gosh, I want to say 7.7. And there's, that 3.3 million is within that. The rest is all exempt debt, which includes the school payment.
Okay,
which
so
First payment is in FY
What
'24.
what I'm trying to get at, ultimately, I probably should have asked you right up front, is how much capacity does the town have to borrow additional exempt debt? Or
Exempt debt?
yeah,
That's a tricky question because per our town financial policies, our total debt service amount should not really exceed 10 to 12%.
right?
However, exempt debt, if it's voted at town meeting, it's a debt exclusion, so it's not really limited by the tax levy because that can be increased by whatever
Well, it's-
amount
it's-
is voted and
It's,
approved by the
it's
residents.
limited by our own financial policies. So that's what I'm trying to get a sense of, is how much, and we have, as you know, we have a lot of capital projects that are in need of funding.
Right, yep.
And I want to try to get a sense of within our financial policies, how much more capacity do we have to borrow and to have that amount be exempt from 2.5?
No, it's a-
My sense is there's not much.
It's a great question, and that's why, you know, fortunately, we have the long-range planning committee that's very helpful in sort of analyzing all of these competing, I don't say it lightly, we have a lot of competing projects and limited resources. I say this every year. It's all, I mean, I joke, but we used to have the scale up with all the competing priorities. It's a real thing. I mean, because this debt, and reminder, this is tax revenue, so this is not exempt debt where we're increasing the taxes above and beyond. This is all has to fit within our annual
Yeah.
budget. So we have to take that into account, and then also, you know, not burdening the taxpayers with having to increase outside of the tax levy additional borrowing with exempt debt. So yes, it is a lot to look at. I don't have a magic number for you for what our capacity is. It all depends on the projects in front of us, the interest rate environment, the timing, other resources we possibly have to supplement that option. It's a hard question to answer. And you know,
That's kind of where I was heading, and I wasn't sure we were gonna get there, but maybe I can ask for, you know, you to furnish the QSIPs that are non-exempt, and then we can just kind of look them up and maybe answer the question ourselves.
I'm sorry, the what?
The security IDs for the actual non-exempt debt, the debt that's identified as non-exempt.
What are you looking to find out exactly?
To answer Chris's question, which is similar
Actually,
to my question.
my question has to do with exempt debt, not non-exempt debt, but you can do the same
Okay,
thing.
well, it's one
right?
minus.
Right.
Yep, and then exempt debt also, you know, I've said this a lot, and it sounds simple, but it's a tricky combination. We try to strategize when we're issuing new debt as old debt rolls off. So that could be a 10-year road bond. That could be the fire station, which was done within Prop 2.5, which is a much larger amount. The high school just rolled off. That was a huge contributing factor to being able to bring on new debt for the Hanlon Elementary School project, because that was a large payment being made each year. So we strategized when the new, you know, they made it, the town, which was fantastic to do, made sure that hit was gonna come, but it was going to come at least a year after the high school payments were rolling off. So the tax bill was, you know, absorbed a little bit of that impact at least. So it's a tricky question because it's all in a moment in time, and you have to be very strategic for when you're going out to borrow and what the interest rate environment looks like and what's rolling off and what our current budget can handle.
Well, I look forward to working with you, with the capital subcommittee.
Great, thank you, I do too.
Are there, yes, for,
Thank you. Excuse me. I think I got your coffee.
Sorry.
If I can turn to your page 14 of your presentation. You have debt authorized but not yet used. And the top two are the school initial phase and the bridge funding. Since we're months away from actually moving in, are you still going to issue that debt, or are we going to cancel it, or what's going to happen with that?
That's a big part of why we're meeting with our town treasurer and our financials advisors in the next couple of months. I actively each month ask for, from the PBC, and Vertex is the company that's handling the project, a budget tracking of where they're projected to spend. So each month I get an update on that. It all depends on what their projected spending is, right? So that debt has been authorized technically, but we don't have that in hand. It hasn't been issued, so.
So when you say it's still a question mark, are you planning on issuing it and then using it for a different purpose in the school?
We would not be able to do that, no. It's authorized to borrow only for that specific project.
but
And
like-
we also, it gets tricky because we'd have to connect with bond counsel on, the 202 say is for the design and feasibility. Can we even use that for construction? So that's an internal conversation we have. And if we need to do some sort of language at town meeting to be able to transfer that, that would be the only place it would go, but we would have to even look into whether or not we could use it for construction.
Okay, because the initial phase, we're at completion,
Yep.
not even initial phase.
Correct.
So you'll be considering presenting to town meeting a warrant article to use it for a different purpose?
No, I'm saying the only other purpose we would use it for would be the construction portion of the project.
Even though it's for initial phase, I'm presuming that's design.
Design and
Right.
feasibility, correct. That's what I'm saying. So right now, I don't have a definite plan for you on whether or not that's happening. That's something, again, like I said, we're gonna be discussing in the next few months. And before that ever happened, you would see that in a FinCom presentation. It wouldn't be blindsided at town meeting.
All right, on a separate one, going back to the free cash, when you say you want to have a $4 million limit, is that so you can have the proverbial safety net, your rainy day fund?
Yep, I guess our version of staying liquid, right? If anything ever came up if a COVID ever happened again or something and we're in severe financial issue, we would still have to be able to process our payroll, pay outstanding invoices, so that sort of covers all of those outstanding liabilities, I guess you could say we have.
Okay, but will we budget for other reserve funds, stabilization, capitalization, other rainy day funds? Are we doubling down on our rainy day funds?
I wouldn't call it that. Stabilization, I would sort of look at as if something urgent came up, a one-time thing. Whereas the free cash amount is really used to do ongoing government business, I guess you could say. It's just it's the reason that we have these sound financial policies and why the town gets to operate the way it does.
In your opinion, you don't think that we're reserving too much money? I mean, you can never reserve too much money, right? But are we putting too much aside that may never be utilized?
I would say no, because these were financial policies that were developed over time, and, I didn't set these. These were set up by a committee and then approved.
And I would add one thing, that I think one of the reasons we get a very high, our AAA bond rating is
Correct.
that we do maintain a very healthy free cash balance according to our policy. So I think it's just very prudent financial planning.
And I did not want to read this, and I won't, I promise, but I just, quickly, one line. DOR, so the Department of Revenue for Massachusetts, actually encourages towns to have conservative revenue projections and departmental appropriations, and actually encourage producing excess income and departmental turnbacks, which all goes into free cash. They encourage us to make sure we have enough, and that guidance is, as George said, why we get the AAA
You
bond.
said it encourage
You can read the whole thing there. That's directly
They
from the Mass
encourage-
DOR.
department turnback?
To have departmental appropriations to reduce excess income and departmental turnbacks. Basically saying, don't under budget your departments so that you're in a deficit at the end of the year.
Or over budget your departments? And
It's a balance. It's a definite balance.
Okay.
And if just really quickly, I know you probably didn't really ask this, but George had brought this up at the beginning, thank you. The total New Hanlon school project that I have there listed for the debt authorized, not yet issued on side 14, that will be reduced by any MSBA reimbursement. So I just want to make sure you know that that's borrowing net of any reimbursement, trying to reduce as much as possible the tax burden impact on residents.
Yeah, one other comment I may add, it probably is indicative of the number of years I've been on FinCom, but I do remember the difficult days we went through many, many years ago when we weren't able to have the cash reserves we have today. So I think we're in a very, very healthy position. But, you do need those funds because there are economic cycles. So I personally think our financial policies are extremely strong. I'm glad to have the questions asked.
Yeah.
But I think we're very, very lucky to have the sound policies and be able to maintain them.
I'll echo that, and I think from a ratings perspective, our strong rating is probably largely a function of how liquid we are, which is a function of free cash. And I heard the idea being thrown around, is there opportunity cost? Should we use free cash to pay down debt and not incur higher interest rates, which is precisely why I mentioned interest rate swaps as being a rate level mitigant while maintaining your liquidity level. So I would just highly recommend you consider it
Thank you.
and discuss that with your
Yeah,
financial.
and those tools are fairly sophisticated financially, so when you talk to your investment advisor, I know you're very experienced in that, but those are fairly sophisticated financial tools, and you can ask the advisor whether or not it's appropriate for us to look into that.
Great.
And
But-
regulatory reporting required to do interest rate swaps. is kind of
Right, Mayor?
Okay, I just want to personally thank you very much for your presentation. Are there any other questions of either the chair of the select board or our wonderful finance director? Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Now I'd like
And I
to,
apologize for my coughing fit, but thank you.
Stephanie, the day you have to apologize for coughing, please.
Feel better.
Yeah, feel better. I'm not even sick, that's the worst part.
No, it's fine, you did
Thank
we
you.
got through it, it's a team effort, okay? So I want to welcome the superintendent and our, Tony, I don't know if you're going to come up, our chair of the school committee. One thing we've done a little differently this year is I really wanted this to be a chance for the superintendent to introduce themselves. This is not a formal presentation, it's more of a chance just to welcome you to Westwood. I know I've had the privilege of meeting you, Chris and I met with you over the summer. I know we also met with you when we had which I'll talk about a little later, when we do our steering committee meeting. So welcome to Westwood. And Tony, I've known you for many years. Welcome for being here with us. But Tim, just any general comments you want to make? This is very informal, and I want the questions to be relaxed and informal too.
Yeah, thank you, George, for the, excuse me, I apparently caught it from Stephanie.
The chair.
It's the chair, right?
Thank you, George, for the introduction. I appreciate that. I think just for some context as well, too, part of the conversation we had is that I have not yet done a formal kind of preview of FY25 with the school committee. We're doing that on Thursday night. And so just sort of from a protocol and process perspective, my first audience really should be the school committee.
Yes.
And then the finance committee afterwards. So I've already said to George that I'll share the slides from Thursday night with him. He can share it with the rest of the finance committee, and then certainly we can have continued conversation after that point in time. So just for a little bit of background, my name is Tim Pavova. I am, as of July 1, the new superintendent here in Westwood, and have been incredibly thrilled and happy to be here. Just by way of context, I am have been in education since 1997. Started as a high school math teacher in the town of Billerica and spent a 26-year career up there. After being a teacher, I was a curriculum coordinator for math and science. Then spent a year doing information systems and accountability, spent a year in the business office as the assistant superintendent for finance and operations, then 11 years as superintendent. And was really happy and proud of what we were able to accomplish in that community, working collaboratively between school officials and municipal government. Was blessed to have a really great finance committee that I work with, so this is actually of about the same size as this finance committee, so this is an environment where I've been happy to be in and be having conversations, and really appreciate and value that as a body you represent you were intentionally designed to represent constituencies from across the community, and appreciate being able to bring your broad-based set of perspectives to the conversation that we have. For me, it was a good opportunity on a personal and professional level at a time to make a change. My oldest son just went off to college this fall, and so that kind of freed up some things on the home front. I've got 2 boys at home, but at the same time, I was looking for a community that was reflective of my core value that we all have a collective responsibility for all of our kids, and all means all, no ifs, no ands, no buts. And I'm happy to find that here. I'm currently going through my entry planning process, where I'm trying to meet with as many different people from across the community as much as possible to identify our strengths, our challenges, our opportunities, those things we want to protect or maintain. And I'll be sharing out the results of that entry planning with the school committee at our November meeting. And that's really going to help generate the next iteration of our district strategy. We currently have a district strategy that runs through the end of the current school year in June of 2024. So the time is right to come in, really get a sense of what the community's values are, what the community is looking to do, where we're looking to go, and then figure out what the next step in the process is. So I kind of transitioned a little bit from me personally to some of where we're heading, but want to take an opportunity to do that. At the same time, and I'm happy to do this either way. You mentioned this sort of being informal, but I can also talk about sort of previews of some coming attractions.
That would be great.
And Tony, if you want to jump in here at any point, but if I'm on a roll, then I think you'll just let me go. So a couple things. So just about FY25, I just want to identify a couple of things that are different, sort of generally speaking, in the school department than it is in the municipal side of government. We are subject, just by the nature of who we are as schools, to greater volatility, just because the needs of our kids are different and depends upon who walks through the door at a given point in time. I want to particularly point out the volatility around special education. It is something that is present in every district, everywhere in the Commonwealth. And coming back to that core value, we have not only a legal but a moral obligation to make sure that we meet the needs of all of our students in the district. And in some cases, that has financial impact, and we need to be responsive to that. As part of the FY24 budget process, both Westwood and every other municipality in the state was hit by the operational services division that had a 14% inflationary factor for private out-of-district tuitions. That number kind of came out of nowhere after about a 12-year history of being between 1% and 3%. We just found out, this may be news to the Finance and Warrant Commission members here, we just found out last week that they released a preliminary FY25 number of 4.69%. So that number, again, is higher than it has been. Some of our messaging, and I'm active with the Superintendent's Association, where we're going to have some legislative advocacy around this. If municipalities are held to Prop 2.5, setting an OSD rate of 4.7 doesn't seem to be consistent with that process. So I just want to kind of point that out for folks in this room. I think seeing the knowing of heads, nodding of heads, I think people understand that. But that is a pressure. And because we have had a transition in some district leadership, certainly I'm new as superintendent. We have a new student services director, Sue Maselli, who is fantastic, replacing Abby Hanscom, who was here for a long time. Sue is fantastic, but anytime, and I've been through in my career 3 different changes in leadership in special education, it adds a level of unknown from a financial perspective, just as things change. So we will learn as much as possible as we go through the year and through the budget development process. And we're going to be responsive to the needs of all of our students that are in front of us. But that's some extra volatility that we will have. So I just want to say that, acknowledge that. We also, as part of our planning, we conducted an equity audit as a district last spring. Very happy with the goals of that audit. And the one sort of that has some immediate potential financial implications is a direct point in that audit to hire a director of human resources for the school department with a focus on equity, about recruiting, hiring, and retaining a diverse workforce that's more representative of our student body. And that's something that is a goal that is important, but that has implications as we think about how we look at staffing for FY25 as well too. Above and beyond that, I just want to take a few moments to talk about capital. I appreciate Stephanie in her presentation really framing the conversation around free cash, the conversation around long-range planning, clearly by the questions that this committee asked, concern about what does debt service look like, how do we plan for that long term, and these are all really obviously very important considerations. Pine Hill is opening in February, and I think just to allay some of the fears around unborrowed funds, we are on time, we are on budget. Those are the magic words in any building project. So I just want to say that very loudly and clearly while we're here this evening, because that's important to say. And we're excited about what that means for our students currently at Pine Hill Hanlon and Pine Hill Deerfield that are moving into that building in February. That being said, we have other needs from a facilities perspective in the school district. I want to particularly point out the 2 biggest ones are at Sheehan and at Thurston Middle School. Those are 2 old buildings. I mean, Sheehan was 1949, I believe. Thurston, I've started referring to Thurston as the original Depression era part of the building with the Eisenhower wing and then the Clinton addition added onto it, because that building has been built since the 1930s and had different components to it.
That addition was way before Clinton.
The most recent one in the...
Most recent one, maybe not, but the one that I went through.
That was the Eisenhower.
That was the Eisenhower one.
Eisenhower.
Yeah.
Eisenhower.
Oh, yeah.
And
Depression, Eisenhower, Clinton.
Okay,
Yeah,
Roosevelt. All right, now I get you.
Yeah. So that being said, we talked about this at a long-range capital planning meeting, actually just as I was coming on board. We have a roofing study that identifies, high 6-figure dollar needs for roofing at Sheehan. We have a roofing and HVAC needs that are a few $1 million, potentially $4 million at Thurston. What we don't have right now as a school department is a long-range plan for how we address these needs. And what particularly we don't have is a long-range plan that has an educational vision and component at its core. Because ultimately, school buildings are one thing, but they're only as valuable as how they either support or, in the worst case, inhibit the kind of education that we can deliver inside of them. So we're going to be, I've talked about this a little bit at school committee, or we talked about this a little bit in September. I'll be talking more about this on Thursday night, the recommendation that we move forward, with trying to do a long-range capital facilities assessment for the district with an educational vision component at its core, so that we can get a sense of what do we do? How do we not throw good money after bad? Or how do we identify those things we need to do to make sure that we maintain a safe learning environment for our kids while we think about the long-range implications of the buildings that we have? So, I mean, that has come, I've know enough from coming through the district. I don't need to wait till I do my entry plan report in November to know that that's a hot button issue. And that ideally, if we're able to procure funding through some mechanism to start that study now, then we can be prepared for the FY25 budget cycle in the fall 24, I guess, leading into FY26, for how we want to plan, for how we want to allocate resources to address our long-range capital needs. So there was a whole lot there. And clearly, I get passionate about this stuff. I love talking about this stuff. I'm happy to have conversation about this, and certainly happy to entertain any questions, or I guess give Tony the floor if he wants to say anything first.
Just brief, two other things. I mean, the only other two things I'll add is, I think it's a long way back. It is, even though we've had a change of superintendent, I think there is really finally a sense after the last 3 years of return to normal.
Yeah. Thank you.
Going into the MCAS, we have a full MCAS set, digging into that, focusing on learning. There's a ton of excitement about the merging, not of a new school, but the merging of really two communities coming together. They have curriculum nights that are aligned. They're doing PTOs that have been coming together. So I think there's a lot of excitement about a lot of things going on in the schools, and I think that's a lot of energy. We had pretty high turnover during COVID. I think this year's turnover was much lower. And the staff, so I think there's a lot of I think we're in a really, even though we've had some changes with the superintendent, I think we're in a really good position there.
I appreciate your confidence in that. And I did bury one lead. I think the other kind of high point that this community should be really, really, really proud of. As I have met people and I've asked about what the strengths, invariably the first thing out of almost everybody's mouth is the school system is such a strength. I've had so many people say, we've moved here because of the schools, that's why we came to town. But to hold that aloft as a shining beacon is a credit to, I can't take credit for that. That's everybody that came before me, including all of you and how you helped support the schools in their path. So I'm incredibly happy to be here and look forward to working with you.
Tim, welcome. I now see if that's an informal presentation. I'm looking forward to a formal presentation. That was an excellent.
It's the first time I've come without slides in a long time.
No, I think it was an excellent overview. So let me turn it over. I'm still going to look to the left. Do I have any questions? Yes. John.
Good evening and welcome.
Thank you.
Of those two priorities that you identified, the Sheehan and the Thurston Middle School, could you just touch on what order you would put those in?
I would say it's premature to answer that question. I mean, that's exactly why you do a study, right? And I realize that there is it's a little fraught with, I'm going to just acknowledge, it's a little fraught with peril answering that question, right? I was not here in the discussions when what ultimately became Pine Hill was brought forward. I know Sheehan was part of that conversation at this point in time, and I know that there are, the Sheehan community certainly deserves that school be addressed. At the same time, I think there are certainly needs at Thurston as well, and the question of what is the appropriate course of action that is, and I'm going to use the MSBA language that in a previous building project I was involved with, I said about 18 billion times over the course of 3 years of selling that project. We want to find the most educationally appropriate and cost-effective solution to the educational needs of the facilities of those buildings. So until we get some professionals in there to look at that and answer that question, I could have a premature opinion, but I think ultimately that doesn't mean much until that work is done.
That's fair. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. George.
I would like to first welcome you.
Thank you.
And, as I said before, for better or for worse, I'm a proud product of the Westwood Public Schools, and even a proud product of the Westwood Public Schools special education. So it makes me very happy to hear that that's a priority for you. I want to offer this committee's, as a resource for you, as we all are on different parts of the town and hear different things. And specifically to what John just said, one of the main things that people has always been in Westwood, so it's not, for 38 plus years in Westwood, so it's not just recent. The middle school is kind of, Westwood's a great school system. That's why people move to Westwood. They come to Westwood because of how the schools are now. And the middle school is, it is a great school, but it is definitely, the elementary schools are fantastic. The high school has great scores and great results. It's the middle school that kind of is the lull in an otherwise outstanding community. And I think that's, from what I'm told, I'm not an educator, and from what I'm told, that's pervasive through many towns. It's the middle school is kind of where you lose it. Some kids go off to private schools because it's not offering. So I'd like to see resources, or as much as we can put towards the middle school, because it bothers me when I see people, oh, we moved to Westwood, but elementaries are awesome, they're great, but, you know, we decided to send our kids to private schools because the middle school wasn't that great. We'll bring them back when they're high school. It hurts to hear that. I mean, I was the first class that went through the middle school under the construction, and it was the Clinton administration, not before that. But in the middle school, it's kind of like, we're gonna patch it, we're gonna patch it, we're gonna patch it. You know, you can only patch a Band-Aid to a gunshot so many times.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, excuse me, there's a lot sort of there, and I think, to your point, I mean, middle schools everywhere get a little bit of a bad rap, and I think part of that is, generally speaking, elementary schools are much smaller, so there's that smaller sense of a close-knit community in elementary school, just by their nature. You know, as again, the parent of two boys that went through middle school themselves, and hopefully they're not watching this, but you know, middle school is that time when kids start to want to separate more from their parents, and so there is that sort of relationship that kind of has an impact on perceptions, right? And so that's some of there. Now, that being said, there is, as I talked about before related to the facility study, physical environments have an impact on teaching and learning, right? And so if there is something that can be done there, because I was not involved in my previous district, I was not involved in any middle school construction projects, but I was involved in the elementary one and I was involved in the high school one, and I saw what the impact of that kind of a learning environment had on both educational performance and on culture. Like anybody, if you're in a space that shows that there is a value in where you are and what you do, you're going to have a better connection to that, and that's going to lead to better outcomes. That being said, it is part of my job to kind of dig in. You're not alone in expressing that sentiment to me, and I'm trying to figure out how much of that is perception, how much of that is reality, and where do we allocate resources in a way to make that better. And that's part of the work that I'm doing is my entry right now.
Tim, since we have unlimited resources, I'm here to advocate for a community that often gets overlooked. We have the kids that need the resources, and yes, we have an obligation to give it to them. We have the kids at the very top, not suggesting that the kids that need resources aren't also at the very top, but we have kids that are very top, that are celebrated, and no expense is spared to challenge them. But we have that great middle from which I come. And oftentimes that great middle seems to be left out. So I encourage you to don't forget the middle.
Yeah. I appreciate it. And when I talk about we all have a collective responsibility for all, and all means all means all. You know, at the very least, leaving aside the academic component for a second, not that, I mean, that's obviously critically important, but for me, as I think about like different surveys that have been done, I think about this is the high school accreditation survey when it's given at different points in time is on that list. And for me, the single most important question I always went to, and it was on the kids survey, do you feel that you have a trusted adult in the building? And if every kid can answer yes to that question, then it means that every kid has somebody who is there that's able to push them and that's able to support them. And that's, if that's true, it means that we're not missing that middle.
Better than we can say about Congress.
Yeah.
So I want to, at this point, you've given us a lot of time. I want to personally thank you. I do want to share one observation. That is, I'm a bit of a social butterfly. I walk my neighborhood. I know everybody. And I've watched my neighborhood over the last 5 years go through a tremendous transition of a younger generation coming in with lots of kids. And I talked to all the families. I know everybody. And it was fascinating. I happened to be walking my little dog at the time the school bus stopped today. And I got into a conversation with two of the parents. One came from way in the from Texas, and another family moved in. And the message delivered to me is, OMG, if you do not realize what you have here in this town in terms of the quality of your schools. We didn't understand it until we came here. And then one of the other families, I don't, hopefully not disclosing anything, is one with a special needs kid. And they just said to me, if you knew how we were treated with such dignity and respect here compared to what we came from a southern state, they said, it's just astounding. So I heard these stories all the time. I never really experienced it. I was so pleasantly taken aback by it. So it does resonate. The last thing I'll say is I personally think for towns like Westwood, the challenge going forward is not on the operating side, it's on the capital side. And as Chris pointed out, or as Rob Gotti doing his facilities committee, I mean, there is a tremendous demand, and we really, even a affluent town like Westwood does not have the resources to meet all of these needs. So how we prioritize that is going to be critical and extremely important. You've got it on your side, the select board has it on the municipal side. But finally, welcome. We look forward to working with you. I know Bill Bruce will be chairing the, Bill's over here. Sorry about that. I'm so used to, I told everybody I'm going to give the left all the attention now. But Bill will be chairing the school subcommittee. We did that on purpose to have some consistency with it. But he's got a good team with him, and look forward to working with you. Also, I know we'll interface with you on the capital side too, as we have our consolidated capital program. So once again, welcome.
No, thank you, and again, I appreciate your time this evening and look forward to working with all of you as well.
And Tony, as usual, thank you too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I guess at that point in time, it's chair's update. Out of courtesy, I know that Mary Ann had a chance to speak. I don't, Rob and Mr. Pepatera, did you, anything you wanted to say, or just leave it as is? Out of courtesy, I wanted to give you a chance to say anything. Okay? Mr. Pepatera? No? Okay, all right. Like the blue shirt, we aligned on that, so we're all set. A couple of updates on my side. I did clarify the funding for the fire department authorized by the select board. It's going to a staffing level of 9. The number 11 deals with what the select board has to figure out for FY25. I wanted to clarify that. We have had our first budget steering meeting, which I think is a very, very effective meeting. It brings the school and their financial folks, the town and their financial folks, brings a representative from the select board, a representative from the FinCom, which I happen to volunteer for, and it allows us to think through some of the challenges we're aware of. So the school and municipal are aware of each other's issues. Nobody's operating in a vacuum. And I think it becomes a very healthy way, if there is an issue, how do we help each other on both sides of resolve the issue? So I think our next meeting, as I recall, Stephanie, is early November, and that's when we really have to roll up our sleeves and get to work. We have set up the subcommittee structures for next year. I think we have 3 new chairs. We are trying to encourage some of the newer members to take over responsibility for chairing some of these subcommittees. It's a lot of work. We have that 5-committee structure, which was new last year. We're repeating it again this year. So I think our subcommittees really, really do a lot of the work in understanding the budgets and the issues coming before us. So that is pretty much my update, and with that, I will turn it over to my vice chair, who, even though he claims he was part of the middle, he did go to the Air Force Academy. He did learn to fly F-4 Phantom, so I think we did pretty well.
I'm a late bloomer.
A late bloomer.
Just 3 things. First of all, Dottie clarified for us, for the benefit of the membership, Dottie clarified for us that if you want to vote on approving the minutes for a meeting that you missed, you have to complete this, what they call the Moen Rule form. Even though the form talks in terms of evidence presented and adjudicatory hearings, which right now is not us, or ever will be us, that is the form that you have to fill out if you want to then vote on approving the minutes from a meeting that you missed. So I'm going to clarify that. And Victoria passed out a copy to everybody, so you should have that.
So Chris, if you read all the background material that was presented,
Right.
and you fill out the form, then you are allowed to vote on the minutes. But can you also vote on other articles, or is it just the minutes?
Good question. I'm not going to stab at that without
Okay,
knowing the
I'll
answer.
get clarification. Maybe town council can step in, but I thought that if you did review all the material, were you allowed to participate in the vote on an article?
You are. If you miss one meeting, you can't miss a second meeting. If you
Okay.
miss a second meeting, you're out. So if you miss one meeting, you can watch the tape, you can read a transcript, you can review all the exhibits, you must certify that you've done that on the form that I believe is
Okay.
in front of you, before you actually take the vote, then you can participate.
Okay, all right,
All right,
thank you.
good.
Excellent clarification.
Two other things, a number of us attended the meeting at the Downey School about 10 days ago on the Canton Street reconstruction project. It was a meeting run by the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, and the purpose of the meeting was to fulfill the state's requirement under a number of state and federal environmental laws that the public have an opportunity to voice their comments on the 20% design of the project. So I want to publicly recognize our own Todd Corchin, who got up. It wasn't his meeting, but he still got up, and there was a tremendous amount of tension in the room. And Todd spoke and diffused that tension and made the meeting a much more productive meeting than I think it otherwise would have been. So kudos to Todd. You should thank Todd for doing what he did. And I'm sure Joe will agree with me. He really deserves credit for standing up there and explaining to the public just what this was all about. So I mention on that because it's a possibility that that project might grow into a warrant article that we would then see. But the next step is on the 23rd of October, I believe. Todd and his group are meeting with the state in the morning and then presenting the results of that meeting to the select board at their meeting that night. And then we'll know more about it at the end. Lastly, the Hale update. There is no new news on the conservation restriction that Hale was trying to sell to us. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. Yes,
I want to echo something because I sometimes feel, this is related to the Canton Street project, I sometimes feel when we get an article or a warrant, when we voted on this and we did it over Zoom, and I think it was like a year ago or a year and a half ago, because a lot of the jokes, I grew up on Canton Street, I right around the corner, and all that, and now I may have missed something, which is very possible, probably even probable. But when we voted and discussed it, it was mainly to put a sidewalk on Canton Street. And I think a lot of the people in the town, and I say this with a lot of verification, are upset because this project has morphed into something more than just a sidewalk. And if in fact it comes back to the FinCom for a warrant article or something, I think we really need to take that into account, because it's looking like no, I don't want to use the term bait and switch,
Yeah.
but it's,
okay, why don't you let,
Well, George, that's why I mentioned the meeting, okay? Todd did an excellent job
he did a great job.
explaining that,
Thank God he
right?
did it, because they were removing people from the room because
This,
of the occupancy.
this is a classic example of, if you want the federal government's money, you've got to play by the federal government's rules, okay? So yes, at the time that we recommended the money to pay for the initial design,
Correct.
right? I would bet that 90% of us didn't think it was anything more than a sidewalk.
Okay, good.
Right? But Todd explained how it now comes to be more than that, and in fact, I learned that it's a total reconstruction of the roadway, including the infrastructure underneath the roadway as well. So there's a lot more to it than adding a sidewalk.
But it's bothering people because they said, well, we voted for one thing and now it's something different, and people don't understand the fine print. But that's our job as the finance, to look at the fine print. And, you know, in some spots on Canton Street.
But George, I went back and looked at the article, and I went back and looked at the write-up. And I think as Chris has just described, at that point in time, that was our understanding. Let me finish. We were voting the design money for a sidewalk. I think as Chris eloquently explained, and I think Todd did a remarkable job in trying to save the town a significant amount of money. He looked for all possible state and federal funding, and it turns out as part of that process to meet federal and state requirements, these are the requirements they put in front of us. Let me finish. So I wanted to go back in my own mind and reassure myself when we did that vote, and I think Chris is right, we understood it was clearly a sidewalk. I think at this point in time, where we are, I think Todd is gonna meet with the feds, report back to the FinCom. I'm hoping,
Select Board.
the Select Board, I'm hoping that there will be some flexibility on the state and federal side, and we'll deal with it at that point in time. But I think anybody to say that we had information other than,
Well,
no, let me
that's the
finish,
problem.
because that concerns me. Because one of the things I insist on as a chair is transparency on the FinCom, okay?
That's not what I said, though. It
I
wasn't.
understand it, but you may be, look, you have an opinion, and I think that for those of us who were on the FinCom at that point in time, and those of us who went in front of town meeting, we thought we were approving exactly what we said we were approving when you look at the write-up. Todd, I think, gave an eloquent explanation in terms of how it is morphed. I think he went above, I didn't attend it, but I watched it online. I think he did an amazing job in trying to set the framework forward, so let's leave it at that, okay?
Well,
No, I want to leave it at that. I really don't want to get into it. George,
I think Todd did a great job, and he cares about the community.
George,
And
enough.
That's what's important.
Enough on the issue, please. We're done. Okay. Are there anything else you want to bring up?
Nope.
Okay. With that, I have, under old business, the only thing I want to bring up is we have done the onboarding document. It is 99.9% complete. We are waiting for a final organization chart, is that I recall, and then we will formally issue our onboarding document. I want to share it with the Select Board. I think Victoria and Chris put in a tremendous amount of work. It really is designed to give a document to a new member or to a citizen. This is how the FinCom operates, so we put a lot of work into it. Let me see with that. Oh, I think from this point on, we're going to shift to the Zoom meetings until we get to the public hearings and our public meeting in the spring. The reason I want to do that, we're trying to accommodate, I think, some of the families who have told us what their working schedules, so I'm trying to make it a little easier. There also may be some other issues the FinCom has to deal with, and I just want to give us some flexibility. So unless there are any major objections, we will go to Zoom, and then we will go to in-person meetings when we do our public meetings and our public hearings. So hopefully everybody's okay with that. With that, we need to get approval of the minutes for our September 6th meeting. And can I get a motion to approve those minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes.
I get a second? Let's do the roll call, please.
Bill Bruce. John Kerry.
Abstain?
Jim Ferrero.
Yes.
Lauren Fitzpatrick.
Yes.
Seth Frederickson.
Abstain.
Mike Gay.
Yes.
George Hertz.
Yes.
Angela Hughes.
Yes.
George Lahan.
Yes.
George Marone.
Yes.
Christina Pedjewicz.
Abstain.
Chris Peretta.
Yes.
And Alex Yell.
Abstain.
Okay, with that, this is the time we open up to the public and press. And I want to welcome any member of the public who has come. I would love to see this whole room filled up with members of the public. We want to hear from you. So if you would just state for the record your name and address, and we will gladly listen to any questions or comments you have. So, is there a, do you want to, do they,
Yeah, you should better go to the mic so they can be recorded.
yeah, you want to like so they can record it if you're okay doing that?
There's probably one on the table, too.
If you want to sit, if you want to sit at the table, you can do that.
Is it on?
It is.
Okay.
It's not to amplify your voice, it's just to record.
All right, my name is Shelley Reaver. I live at 549 Canton Street. I think the group has a misunderstanding about how the warrant came to be about the sidewalk project. Because you all voted to send the warrant to town meeting last year in 2022, is my understanding. In March of 2021, DPW had a Zoom meeting for the Canton Street neighborhood about the project. At that time, they were very clear, and you can find this on the DPW website. It says the Canton Street Sidewalk Design, March 1st, 2021 meeting. In that meeting, it was clear there was a huge bicycle lane in addition to a sidewalk. So the street was going to be widened by about 18 to 20 feet.
the road was going to be reconstructed. That's what the state calls this project, the reconstruction of Canton Street. So I think, and this is the forum that I'd like to say this because the FinCom is here, the Select Board is here, Town Council is here, the Assistant Town Administrator is here. I would like the town of Westwood to sort of look inward, take a look back to see how did this ever come to be called the sidewalk project? Because I did some homework and I saw that when it came to you last year from the previous select board, or 2 out of 3 members for the previous select board, it was called the Canton Street Sidewalk Project.
Right.
And you voted on it, and then it went to town meeting as the Canton Street Sidewalk Project. And so, of course, it passed because who can be opposed to a sidewalk? My concern is that the people in town who understood the depth of the project, cutting down hundreds of trees, taking down dozens of stone walls, moving the street into some people's front yards, and widening the road by 18 to 20 feet. I know that was not made clear at town meeting or to all of you, and so it's concerning to me as a town resident, because I know that you all voted on it in good faith. Again, who can be opposed to a sidewalk? So when you talked about, you assumed it was a sidewalk, and then Todd went to get the state approval. The town had already gotten the state approval for the project over about 2.5 years ago now, but people weren't talking about it. So I just wanted to make that clear, that I think somebody in Westwood has to look back and be, in the future, be more transparent about what comes to you all and what goes to town meeting, because $900,000 is a lot of money. And it wasn't stated at this meeting, but there was an overwhelming opposition to the project at the meeting 10 days ago at the Downey School. Having said that, I just have one question about the budget.
Can I just
'cause
respond to you to say, I just want to thank you for your comments. I think they're, certainly on my part, I think you've made some very, very strong comments, and thank you.
Thank you. So I just had a question about, in Stephanie's presentation, under debt authorized, not yet issued, it has the Canton Street sidewalk design. Does that mean the money has not been spent?
Yeah, would you?
Hi.
So, I'll just clarify, we had, few projects that were, voted at town meeting of 2022, that was one of them. We, issued a ban, so that's a short-term, I know gets a little technical, it's a short-term borrowing. So we do have, money that we borrow for that, it just hasn't been issued long-term.
So does that mean TEC has not been paid?
We have funding that has been paid for the whatever we've, used for the design project so far, we have funds available for that. We borrowed, this year for a van sale, short-term.
All right.
Does that answer your question? It was a
As much
short-term
as I can
bill.
understand town finance, yes.
Of course, so we're gonna be evaluating that, usually bans, they're 1 year, and then the next time we go to borrow, we'll either roll it into a long-term borrowing, or maybe do another 1-year ban.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, thank
Can I
you.
chime
Excuse me.
Thank you.
So yes, the town has borrowed the money and paid TEC, but no, they haven't put it into a long-term financing.
Okay.
Alex, did you want to? Yes.
Shelley, thank you for your comments, and thank you for your comments last week or 2 weeks ago at the meeting. To clarify, I think only a small portion of those total funds has been spent to date. So I don't know if that was your question, whether.
Yeah, I just was
So-
curious.
I don't know
Yeah,
if,
that would
Stephanie,
make
you
sense.
can speak to how much has actually been spent.
If I look through my email, we ask, on about a bi-month, every other month, we ask our department heads where they are with spending percentages, so I can sort of look to see if I have that
It's
right
okay.
now.
I just wanted to understand the basic
George.
concept. Okay.
We
Steph?
just, can I just clarify, so, each fiscal year we spend money on a project in, we are required to actually borrow for that funding within a certain time period. So we are all within the guidelines for that.
Okay, thank you.
Stephanie, can you just tell us what the short-term borrowing amount is? Do you know that?
That specific project, for those 3 projects, it was the amounts listed, I think it's $1,225,000 is the amount for that van sale.
Are there any? Yes.
My name is Maura Van Wagenen, and I live at 181 Canton Street. I want to second everything Shelley had expressed, and to please take that into consideration. And one of the things I learned tonight, I want to thank you for all of your work. I know you guys do a lot for the town, and I appreciate all your knowledge and expertise in what you do. But I saw that you had that long-term planning committee for expenditures for the town. I think one of the things that came out loud and clear at the meeting is people do want a sidewalk. They just don't want reconstruction of Canton Street. And I think that that's probably true of other areas of town. I know that what we had learned in our, gathering of people to, save Canton Street as we know it and have lived with it and want it to keep the rural country feeling that so many of you have grown up on, and not change it to a strong urban setting, is Gay Street was in the same boat. They did not want to change the appeal of their street. So going forward, I know there's all sorts of challenges, school committee, fire department, schools, taxes, but I think sidewalks should really be considered on that.
I want to once again also thank you so very much for your comments. One thing I want to clarify, strangely enough, the one group that is not allowed to participate in Mr. Gotti's long-range financial planning are the members from the FinCom. The town charter does not allow us as members to sit on any other committee. So, but I will tell you that we will watch very, very carefully from the financial side, whatever recommendations come forward. But I want to thank you. I just think it's so great to have citizens show up. I wish the room were filled. It's so important for us to get feedback.
Should have
so
come to
thank you.
Downey School the other night. It was unbelievable.
Yeah,
It was a great showing.
the fire chief had to kick some people out.
Yes,
right?
second time, I guess, in history that we've
But
heard
thank you
about
so
that.
very much.
Yes.
I'm not going to keep you. I know you're saying this meeting, it's probably gone over.
It's okay.
I'm Julie Irvine. I live at 199 Canton Street. I've been a resident for 54 years in Westwood, and I own a business in Westwood. And I've been through before all the committees personally to open my business, except the FitCom committee. But so now I got a good feeling of what it's all about, and thank you again. I do want to just mention, it was an outstanding show up of, I think, I may have misunderstood you. I don't think anything bad would have happened. It was a lot of very caring people like myself and my friends here. And I think I probably started this because I'm not a political person, but when I read what was going on and finally my neighbors were saying, I thought, oh, a sidewalk would be nice. I'd love to meet my neighbors. I've lived in this particular house 51 years, and I don't know half of the neighbors. I don't know any of the neighbors except my across the street and her, because it's just not a neighborhood. I grew up in Jamaica Plain where you knew all your neighbors. You lived in 3 decades. They moved in the neighborhood. You brought them cookies. You brought them a cake. It's not like that. The parents have to go places, bring their kids to play in someone's yard, but I won't go on and on. I just want to thank you all for listening to us. It was a wonderful meeting. I think I started the problem because I called my neighbor across the street, said, you know what's going on? I don't understand. And I talked to some of the neighbors, and they don't know. So I have this big house with lots of room, and I thought, I have one of the oldest houses in Westwood. There's nothing fancy about it. It's just a nice old farmhouse. And we thought there would be 15 people. I made cookies. We baked cookies, and I had coffee and all that. And 60 people came. We were shocked because no one knew. That's why they came. They knew about a sidewalk, but they didn't know anything else. So I kind of opened the can of worms. And we all got together, which was nice. I met a lot of neighbors I didn't know. Now we're a neighborhood. And we just showed up as citizens. We own the town. And we thought we wanted to just let you know what we want. We don't want to cause trouble. We love our neighborhood. We love our street. We have beautiful trees there. We don't want them all cut down. And thank you again. I could ramble all night.
Thank you, but I also want to tell you what impressed me is the power of social media, however the organization took place. We did receive copies. They were asked to send to us of all the petitions. And I think what astounded me more than anything else with the 600, between 500 and 600, and what I said to myself, it's just the power of people coming
Yeah, we
together.
sat
So-
outside, I sat outside Roach Brothers.
and I have to tell you that what it says to me is, this is what, this is what the town's all about, and this is what democracy is all about. So whatever happens, I would compliment you for making sure that the electeds and the appointed volunteers, clearly, I certainly heard what you said.
Good. Thank you all very
Thank you.
much. Go home and have a glass
That's
of wine.
okay.
or cup of
Anybody
tea.
else like to come up and speak? Just thank you so very much. Out of courtesy, I want to let the select board, do you want to adjourn your meeting?
We do.
Okay, so why don't you adjourn your meeting, and then we will go ahead and adjourn ours.
So ours won't go on in perpetuity. I will accept a motion to adjourn the select board meeting.
So.
Roll call, Mr. Privatera.
Aye.
Mr. Gotti.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you for
Mr.
attending.
Chairman, point of order.
Yes,
Now that we're meeting in person, you don't have to do roll call. You can do a general vote.
oh my
You can
gosh.
save yourself
Can
time.
I get a general motion, or a motion to adjourn this
Motion to
meeting?
adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
Second.
Mr.
All in
Town-
favor?
I am so glad you came tonight.
We're adjourned.
All in favor? Aye.
Good old days.
You have to go back.